So today is the 1st of February 2023 and I'm aiming to film, edit and post this vlog all in one day because for me it's 30 years since I started out as a photographer. Exactly 30 years ago today I walked into the offices of the Northamptonshire Evening Telegraph on work experience age 15 and my life transformed. Now it might seem a slightly odd date to pick, to choose as my kind of birth date if you like, but my logic is that there isn't really an official route into photography. Unlike say a doctor or an electrician where you have to achieve a certain certificate, a certain degree of education and you reach qualifications and that allows you to work in that capacity, photographers can enter the trade from almost any direction. And even myself, I've had a college degree, I've graduated from that, I worked as an assistant and stopped assisting, I've had my first magazine cover published, all of which could perhaps equally be good birth dates, good points where I could say, right, this is where it started. But for me, age 15, that was the big transformation. That was when my photography went from being something that was kind of something I was vaguely interested in to something that I thought, oh my God, I want to spend the rest of my life doing it. So that's why I mark this as my birthday. And to celebrate my birthday, I have got 30 tips that I've picked up in 30 years as a photographer. Enjoy. First tip, and probably the most fundamental tip I can give you, and I will record a more in-depth vlog about it soon, is know what you are photographing. Sounds horribly vague, I know, but if you understand what it is you've actually seen in front of you that excites you and makes you want to photograph it, you will do a much better job of creating a memorable, impressive image about it. If you understand that, oh, isn't this scene in front of me beautiful, this landscape, but what about that landscape? You know, is it the depth of colours in the sunset? Is it the beautiful shapes the trees are making where the roots are twisted around something? Or if it's a portrait of somebody, oh gosh, they're really attractive. Okay, what is it? What about them is attractive? How do you get that across on camera? And as a professional, of course, this for me is what hopefully, most of the time, my briefs are. When I'm tasked with photographing something, I am told why. You know, it's not just we need a photograph of something, somebody, whatever. We need it because they are X, Y, and Z. They've achieved X, Y, and Z, whatever that might be. So I have to get that across in the photograph. And knowing that, knowing what it is you're photographing, is hugely, hugely helpful. You may still get a really amazing image otherwise, but you get a much better chance if you have a good idea up front of what it is you're actually photographing. Always remember, gaffer tape is like the Force. It has a dark side, a light side, and it holds the universe together. Don't show your rubbish. This is the portfolio that I took with me to apply to college back in 1995. And about 2 weeks before I went for the interview, I had work experience with a local professional photographer. And as I was showing him through it like this, and I'm obviously talking to him about the fact that I've got an interview at college pretty soon, I started making excuses about some of the shots. I started saying, oh, I couldn't quite print, you know, that one how I wanted. I didn't get that right on the day. I wanted to do this, I wanted to do that. And after a couple of pages, he just stopped, looked at me and said, well, if this is rubbish, why are you showing me? If that means only show me one or two really decent, outstanding pictures, just show me those because I'll remember the rubbish. Don't make excuses for it. Now, he didn't call it rubbish, he used a different word, but you get my gist. People will remember the rubbish. Only show the very, very best stuff you've got. You can never have too many spigots, crocodile clips, clamps, safety cables, ball bungees, tripod bush adapters, and 1001 handy little tools like that. So buy far more than you need and put lots of them in every bag you own. Now this is a huge topic. Clearly a quick tip can only skate over it, but never sign away your copyright. It's very complicated, it varies from country to country what the law is regarding copyright, but essentially copyright is your authorship of that work, those images, those videos, whatever it might be. That's the bit that says they're yours and you own them and you created them. Now when you get into the professional world and there's such a thing as usage, whereby a commercial client makes use of your images and they pay a fee depending on the scale of usage, it's feasible that they might want what's called all rights. What that means is that they are able to use it for any purpose they want without having to pay you again. Obviously, that means potentially you're losing out on income, but under some circumstances, that might be a sensible thing to do, as long as you're remunerated properly. What makes no sense is giving away your copyright, because not only have you lost the ability to ever earn any more money out of that work, but it's also legally not even your work anymore. There's quite a big difference there, okay, between somebody simply being greedy and wanting all rights, okay, maybe we can negotiate something, and demanding your copyright, where it doesn't matter, legally it's now their thing and no longer your creation. Don't sign your copyright away, kids. I've got a whole video about this which you can enjoy at your leisure, but a really useful, helpful thing to do to minimize cock-ups when shooting is to zero out your camera. What this means is that every time you put it away, you return the settings to a consistent set. Doesn't matter what they are, as long as you are consistent. I leave mine in manual at a certain exposure, with the white balance set a certain way, with the file type and the file size a certain way, and so on, because yeah, I can't guarantee that when I first pick the camera up on the next shoot I do, I will need those exact settings, but I know where I'm starting from every single time. And it massively reduces the chance of me picking it up and it's still left in some random setting I was using a couple of nights ago at a really dark event I was shooting, and the white balance is all over the place and the ISO's all over the place, and the first few frames I take are useless. So zero out, and you know you're starting from a consistent starting point every time. It's a fact of life beyond just photography that, of course, you are only as good as the people around you. Make every effort you can to work with good people, with good art directors, good stylists, good models and subjects, good assistants, good hair and makeup artists, because a good team, a good crew will support you, nurture you, you can bounce ideas off each other. The shoot won't feel like it's work because everything will get done so efficiently and so well. And it's true that, of course, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link, because the flip side of this is if you're working with people and things aren't going well, in which case you have to develop the skill to professionally, politely, but firmly stop working with people who are making your life difficult. Good people can make a huge difference in a positive way, and of course, bad people can do the same in the opposite direction. Now, this is bound to grate with some people, I appreciate, but megapixels don't matter. Now, I know, if you start with a really high-res image, obviously you've got more options when it comes to cropping it and how you want to present the final image, and of course, you can print it bigger too. But here are two shots. One was taken on a 12 megapixel camera and one was taken on a 45 megapixel camera. Can you tell me which is which? No, I thought not. And I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, yes, but Tom, they're on a really low-res screen. They're just, squished down to fit on a high-def video. That's my point. I don't know what percentage, 80%, 90%, higher than that, of the images that you will put out there in the world will be seen at low res. Now, that doesn't mean they don't have to be really high quality, but the actual resolution that they start at is less important than you might think. Higher res images do carry their own drawbacks of course, much bigger file sizes, using up more storage, slower to transmit, etc., etc. Don't be obsessed with, you must have the highest megapixel count possible in your cameras. I recall very well back in the early days of digital with 6 megapixel, 8 megapixel, 12 megapixel cameras, producing huge, really beautiful quality prints from those low resolution files, simply because with a decent lens, good lighting, taking care of all the technical issues that you're supposed to take care of, you can still produce really, really good quality shots, just as you could take a modern 45 megapixel, 50 megapixel shot and make a complete hash of it if you don't take care of the basics. This is quite a technical one, but also a little bit abstract and perhaps a touch hard to get your head around. It's really important to remember that our eyes can see a greater range of contrast than pretty much any camera sensor can. So, when you're lighting a subject and you're building your light around something, you might look at it with your eye and think, that is absolutely perfect, that's fantastic, I've got this lovely contrast, these highlights, these shadows, it's brilliant. When you shoot it, you're then surprised when you come back and the shadows are all blocked up and there's no detail in them. That's because the camera sensor simply isn't as sensitive as your eye. What you need to do, as one of my lecturers at college always used to put it in slightly colloquial terms, is fill it until you're almost crying. What he meant was you need to lift those shadows using some kind of fill, whether it's a reflector or adding a light to it, until you think you've almost ruined that lovely contrast you had from highlight to shadow, at which point it's probably going to look really good on camera. Because the simple truth is, it's very, very easy to add contrast in post, but it's much harder to remove contrast in post and still maintain some image quality. There's an old military saying that 2 is 1 and 1 is none, and it definitely applies in photography. Always have a backup. Now that goes for equipment, but it also goes for your files, of course. Make sure you've backed up your work. And when it comes to gear, okay, you don't need 2 copies of every single piece of equipment you've got. You don't necessarily need 2 identical camera bodies, 2 50mm lenses, but you need to have some other way of shooting a job if your front rank kit decides to give up on the day. This is another one of those, arguably it's a general life rule, not just photography, but don't be, what's a nice term? An idiot. I can think of far stronger terms, but let's say idiot for now. There's just no need to be. Even if people on set, people you're working with are really, really getting your goat and winding you up, don't. As a professional photographer, you're expected to be professional. There will be situations and times where you are absolutely grinding your teeth because some of the people you're working with are making you mad. That's to be expected. It happens in every walk of life. Don't lose your temper. Don't lose it completely and do something horribly unprofessional, because firstly, dealing with situations like that is part of being professional, so you have to expect it. Secondly, if you do something truly chronic like that, you may find, understandably, that work from that direction dries up because you were known as being an absolute idiot on that shoot. Okay, tempting though it may be, when situations like that occur, take a deep breath, step back, and carry on and try and be as professional as you can, no matter how stupidly other people might be behaving. Now, I think this is something that all photographers can benefit from, but particularly if, like myself, you do a lot of action photography, learn and get used to using back button focus. What it does is it separates out the action of focusing from shooting. That means that you can shoot whether the camera says you're in focus or not, and in some instances that can be extremely useful. As somebody like myself who grew up with manual focus cameras, it's completely natural anyway. I'm used to the notion of focusing and shooting, and they're 2 separate options, so it's not actually that difficult for me to learn. In fact, I probably struggle more with the times I have to use, one button focus, if you like. That's much more challenging for me. But if you're shooting action, being able to separate out focusing and actually taking the shot can be hugely beneficial. If you can find someone who will give you honest feedback on your work, grab hold of them and don't let go. Honest, valuable, insightful feedback on the work you create is so, so valuable, because most people will simply tell you what they think you want to hear. Because in truth, most people don't really care about your work. Even if there's criticisms to be made, most people are too polite to make them. And if they do make criticisms, they tend to just slag you off rather than say, well, you haven't got it quite right here, but to change that, you need to do this, that, and the other. Most people also, of course, aren't prepared to spend the time getting into the nitty-gritty with you and digging right down into the weeds of where you're going wrong or how you can improve. But if you find somebody who can do that for you, my God, their value is beyond price. A good college lecturer will do that, a good business mentor will do that, a good friend, hopefully a partner, however you might view these people. The main thing is honest feedback and helpful criticism is absolutely priceless. Really quick and easy, this one. Take some double-sided tape and put a strip of it inside your lens caps and your body caps. What this will do is it will help to pick up dust and prevent that dust from getting onto the front of your lens, or worse still, onto the center of your camera. Do make sure to actually top this tape up now and again though, because of course tape that is lost its stick is basically useless. As you can see from some of my ones here, I'm a bit slack about getting around to replacing them. Don't revolutionize your workflow, okay? The process you follow to go from shooting an image to getting a finished image out there in the world is critical. It needs to be consistent, it needs to be reliable so that you don't make mistakes, it saves you time, you can spot errors as you're about to make them because you've got a consistent process you follow. It's also safe because you'll know when you're backing things up and how you're archiving things. And there are always lots of little ways you can tweak things, but tweak is the operative word, okay? Don't make big dramatic changes to your workflow in one go. That way chaos leads. Okay, by all means research new tweaks here, there and everywhere and make little adjustments, but do not make big adjustments to your workflow. Things will go horribly wrong and it will cost you a lot of money. This is one for all of you who either already are or are seriously considering actually making a living out of photography. Do not expect to be shooting 5 days a week for 50 weeks a year. Life generally isn't like that. There are undoubtedly some photographic disciplines where you will have enough work that every single day you are shooting something and it's a bit like a production line. I can guarantee you most freelancers, and most photographers are freelancers, will have much more sporadic amounts of work. Now that's absolutely fine, but you do need to get your head around that before you start, because you're going to have a mindset that can adapt to periods of being very busy and periods of being very quiet. If that doesn't sound like your sort of thing, then earning money out of photography probably isn't for you. So somebody said to me a long time ago that if you saw it, you missed it. And of course, when you think about the physics of how cameras work, that's completely true. With SLR style cameras, you can't see the exact moment the photograph is taken because of course the mirror will have come up for the shutter to open and the sensor to be exposed. With mirrorless cameras, it's a bit different. You are technically watching a live video, but of course there's a tiny delay in that video. There has to be. So it is true that if you saw it, you missed it. And if you're trying to catch a particularly perfect peak moment of action, or even just somebody's expression, you need to get good at slightly predicting when things are going to happen. You need to be just ahead. There are lots and lots of tricks and techniques you can practice to get good at this. But here's a simple difference from a shoot just a couple of days ago where I had to catch a runner in a shaft of light I created. The difference between these two shots is fractions of a second. Okay, the runner's coming straight at me, I'm focusing as she comes in, and I've missed it by the tiniest bit, but the difference in lighting is huge. All because I probably shot it when I saw it. Therefore, I missed it by whatever degrees of a second. We all know as photographers that the light at the start and end of the day can be absolutely beautiful. That's why it's called magic hour in the industry. The truth is, it's pretty much never an hour. The amount of time you've got at dawn and dusk when you've got that beautiful warm light can vary hugely. So if that's what you need to capture, besides checking the weather anyway, make sure you know what time of year it is, in terms of the season, whereabouts you are in the world in relation to the equator and how high the sun will be, because the difference can be huge. Over here in the UK, sort of winter time, magic hour can last for ages. It can take a long time as the sun sort of does this very low arc. In fact, magic hour can last all day in midwinter if you get a clear sunny day. By comparison, I've done lots of shoots in much warmer climes, much closer to the equator, where the sun's arc is more like that. And magic hour at either end of the day is over almost before you know it's happened. So do a bit of homework if you're trying to shoot at sunrise or sunset, otherwise you get a nasty surprise when it's dark before you know it. Glass lasts longer than camera bodies. This is my 24-70 f2.8, which I have been using since 2008. It has now been on the front of 1, 2, 3, 4. It's on its 5th camera body. Now, don't get me wrong, it's got a lot of character. It could do with some bit more TLC, and I will replace it at some point. But it has outlasted, well, it's obviously still on one of those camera bodies, but it's outlasted the other 4 because the technology in these doesn't change that dramatically. You know, I don't tend to get firmware updates for these lenses, and as an investment, they are much sounder than camera bodies per se. So if you're looking for somewhere to put your money, I'd invest it in good glass because it'll last a very long time. The best way to study photography is to assist other photographers, or if you can't, try and do work experience. There is simply no substitute for working with professional photographers, learning how they solve problems, how they work through the creative process, and getting exposure to the industry and the wider world of photography. There's just, like I say, no substitute for it. It's an incredibly good experience. And if you have the opportunity to assist other photographers, take it. I worked as an assistant for 3 years for around 30 different photographers, and it was absolutely critical to my career development. There is no doubt about it. I know I'm a little bit perfectionist and anally retentive, but a really useful habit I've picked up in recent years is whenever I learn something new, whether that's a camera technique, I've got new equipment, a new method of uploading files, archiving, backing stuff up, I make a checklist. And then when I come to do that process, I work through it. Because the simple fact is, stuff that you do every single day, you don't need to think about it. But new methods, new habits, new processes, you'll often need to stop and think, oh, do I do this first or that first? Or which folder do I save this to? Or what format does that need to be? Or which setting needs to be used first? With a checklist, you're pretty good to go. You can be fairly confident that you will do A, then B, then C, and you just work your way through it, and it minimises cock-ups. If you're self-employed as a photographer, which is highly likely, it's also highly likely you're the sort of person who thinks you have to do everything yourself. Wrong. Really, really important to understand what you are good at and what other people are good at. One of the best examples I can give you for this is get an accountant. You will have to file taxes every year and file accounts every year. You are not an accountant, unless perhaps you were in former life and you've transitioned into photography. The odds are you don't know what you're doing. If you think you can save time and money by not using an accountant, you are wrong. I guarantee you. It will take you much longer than it would take an accountant, and that time could have been spent doing your job and actually earning money. Okay, so know what you're good at, stick to what you're good at, and pay other people to do the other jobs. I can't for the life of me remember where I was first taught this, which photographer I assisted was really strict about it, but it was 20 plus years ago. If it's closed, it's closed. If it's open, it's open, no matter what the camera case. The logic is, this is closed, the lid is visibly closed, and the zips are done up. So that if somebody picks it up without looking, it stays closed. And if it's open, so you need to get access to the stuff, it stays open like that. The risk is, of course, somebody closes the lid, but doesn't close the bag, and they pick it up in a hurry, and stuff goes flying everywhere. I've done that many times, as I'm sure other photographers have. So remember, if it's closed, it's actually closed, and if it's open, it's open. Now, it's very difficult, I've found, to pay the mortgage, the rent, the bills in exposure. Working for free is a very controversial topic, and as with a few other things, I intend to cover it in more detail in a vlog in the future. But if you do choose to work for free, do it under very, very controlled circumstances that you are happy with, and be extremely wary of being offered exposure as payment for your work. Because, like I say, I've found that banks, building societies, etc., don't take it as payment. The same college lecturer I mentioned earlier, who instructed us to fill it till you're almost crying, would also hammer on at us about how important it was to trust our gut instincts. Now, this applies in life generally, and in fact, in photographic terms, it's not necessarily related to trusting your gut when it comes to ideas. As a professional, the times this has really mattered to me have been when I have had suspicions about a client or about a job, wondering whether, will I get paid on this one? Are these people a bit dodgy? Is this job perhaps beyond what I can handle or that the client can handle? Do they understand the complications of this job or how big it is? And if your gut instinct is telling you something is very wrong, I'd strongly suggest you listen to it, because it can save you an enormous amount of hassle. They're not a sexy, exciting piece of equipment, but a good strap is a really, really worthwhile investment. I take no money from them whatsoever, but I've been using Black Rapids for more than a decade now, and they are absolutely fantastic. They're not cheap, although they have replaced bits for me when they've gone wrong. The logic is not only about protecting your camera gear and preventing you from dropping it, but far more importantly, cameras can be replaced. You only get the one back. Okay? And by the time you're carrying 2.8 lenses, big pro bodies, a couple of them, and other bits and pieces, decent straps that help to spread the weight out and balance your kit will save you so much genuine pain. Now, believe me, this can sometimes be the hardest thing to do as a freelance photographer, but it is okay to say no to work sometimes. There can be lots of reasons for this. You can simply be burnt out. The work might not suit your style, your creative approach. You might not morally want to do the work. You might feel that the client isn't a good fit for you, or you might suspect that the job is simply going to create far too much hassle for the money you're going to get paid. It's okay to say no in those situations. It really, really is. It'll take you a while to build the confidence to do it, but you will really reap the benefits sometimes of stepping back a moment and going, no, this isn't going to work, and just walking away. Politely, professionally, of course, but learn to say no sometimes. If you're self-employed and freelance like most photographers are, get your invoices in as quick as possible. It's almost certain that the companies you're invoicing are going to take a little while to pay you, sometimes a very long time. You don't want to be the weak link in the chain, so the moment you've got enough information gathered, all the stuff you need to know about expenses, receipts, etc., and the purchase order number from them or whatever admin data you need, get your invoice together and get it sent off. Because like I say, it could be weeks, months before you get paid, and if you're already delaying that yourself because it's taking you long to get your invoice together, then that's quite stupid, isn't it? And it's going to be much longer before you actually have money in your bank account. No matter what workflow you use, I would strongly recommend that you keep A, the master files. If you're shooting RAW, keep the RAW files so you've got them to refer back to. But B, as you work through and you get towards your final finished images, keep high-res, layered if need be, master files of things. So for all my stuff that goes on to become the published bits or that I have for my portfolio, I keep the layered Adobe Photoshop PSD files in a big folder, because from those, not only can I create really nice versions of things rather than say having to work from some lower res JPEG I made once, but because they're layered, if at a later date I realize I need to change something, I can simply go back into Photoshop, I can adjust the layers individually, I can take layers out, add different layers of things, and I've got all the different components there that I can adjust as I see fit. You know, way back in the day when I was just starting out in digital, I just kept JPEGs of things because storage was very, very expensive and I didn't really know what I was doing. Storage isn't expensive these days, so yes, keep firstly the RAWs and secondly, layered master files of your best shots. If you're in any way serious about your photography, I imagine you're doing this already, but if not, start now, and that is create some kind of sourcebank, as I call it, or scrapbook, or Pinterest board, whatever form it needs to take, that is a collection of imagery that inspires you. Without that, the ideas you come up with will often be fairly first order, fairly straightforward, but the broader your range of influence is, the wider you take inspiration from, the more interesting and the more exciting your images are going to be. So there you go, there's a few things to keep you ticking over. I'll see you again in 10 years when somehow I'll have to come up with 40 suggestions.